Let's start. All right. So we will start the conference now. Thank you everyone from your presence. We organized this conference in common with Mosaique there, and we would like to thank also the Professor Kresin from the introduction and the conference. So we will start the conference now. So we organized this conference in common with Mosaique there, and we would like to thank everyone from the at the conference.
Hello, my name is Oleksiy Kresin. I am professor from Ukraine, and here I have a program for 1 year. Sorry that I am not speaking in French, but I do understand some words. And I'm not so much talented in languages. Our talk now is, and our conference here is on a very difficult topic. It's very emotional, it's very difficult to speak about this just in legal terms without any emotions. For example, previous night was most heavily bombing of Kyiv. Yes, for Russians it was not successful, but anyway, it's a very hard stress, and people have this stress every night. And nobody knows if Ukrainian devices will work properly, or these missiles, bombs, and drones will reach their goals. And every morning I'm starting from phoning to my relatives, to my son, to my mother. And before this, I'm praying. I'm afraid of calling them because nobody knows if they survived this night or not. And this is the beginning of every my day. And not only of of course, but for millions of people who call in and asking if you are alive. Nobody even asking in what humor you are today, or how do you feel today. People just asking, you alive? Yes, good. And that's all. That's another mode of living, and this is quite difficult. Even if you are here, but you're always at your country at the same time. Today we are speaking about Russian invasion into Ukraine. To Ukraine, let it be, international legal aspects. And you will have two speakers. One is me, and another speaker is Liliana Tymchenko. Now she is in Ukraine, but working for Lithuanian University. And let me do a concise speech. What I want to speak about is about genocide intent. I want to speak about that aggression and genocide are born first in minds. I will try to do the presentation short. Let us start with Russian ideology. I found, and not only me, that the core of Russian ideology is imperialism, Nazism, and irredentism. Irredentism is less known term, but if you don't know this, just raise your hand. First is the idea of divided great Russian nation. It means for Russians that all Eastern Slavonic peoples, so not only Russians, but only Belarus and Ukrainian people, are denied of the right to exist. They have to be deprived of identities, of their languages and cultures. And the second idea is a Russian space, Ruski Mir. It could be, in other words, not space, but world, Russian world, but it will be very strange to hear this. But it's the idea of spaces. So the first idea, divided great Russian nation, is of course has many elements in it, and the second idea is clearly imperial. The idea of empire, the idea of gaining back historical lands, so-called historical lands of Russia, the restoration of Russian empire. And the claim that all imperial, all that was 100 years, even more, in Russian empire is Russian. It's a denial of the very essence of the world legal order according to UN Charter. Today, for example, I had a small discussion with one professor from UNIL, and he told, once for longer time, Crimea was a part of Russian Empire, so it's Russian. Very strict logic. Once Crimea was a part of Roman Empire, it's Italian. Once Crimea was a part of Ottoman Empire, so it's Turkish. Do you feel the difference between imperial and national? No. So Russian Empire is not Russia, it's empire. Roman Empire is not Italian, it's empire. And but for Russians, for contemporary Russians, and it's stated in their textbooks, other things.
It's empire. Roman Empire is not Italian.
I hope it's not the.
And for contemporary Russians,
please, Liliana, switch off the audio. We hear something.
It's empire.
Please. But thank you for any assistance. So it's a very strange idea that former empires are the heritage territorially and by peoples of new national states. It was another way to organize the space, political space, to organize the legal space. But for this professor, Crimea is Russian. I'm just have an example. If you will speak about Crimea from ancient time to the end, to the middle of 13th century, it was a part of different, states. For example, Roman Empire and Byzantine Empire. Then it was a partly, from that time, a part of Ottoman Empire for some centuries. Then of Russian Empire. After the Russian Revolution, it was a longer war for Crimea also. And finally, it was a part of Russia, of Russian Federation in the frame of Soviet Union for 20 years. 20 years. After the Second World War and a little bit later, it was passed to Ukraine. And became the part of Ukraine. Yes, geographically, it's absolutely natural to be a part of Ukraine for Crimea because the only land part is connected with Ukraine. But it's a longer question. I can discuss for hours about history, about population, other things. But what about law and what about organization of states? When it was Russian? In the time of empire. But anyway, let us continue with ideology. What ideas were proposed by Russia in previous year with a large-scale invasion? So when Crimea was already occupied by Russia, and the same as a part of eastern Ukraine. The idea of single people, single means Ukrainian and Russians are single people. They have single spiritual space, and we need to denazificate Ukraine. This was a Russian idea. And by this denazification, they mean denying a right of Ukrainians to exist, deprive of identity, language, culture, history, and church. If you are normal Ukrainian, you have to be Russian. If you want to be Russian, you have to be denazified. You could be killed, or you could be taken to a special camp to re-educate you. The next idea, the independence of Ukraine is a tragedy because the Russian Empire has to be restored. The next idea, very specific, the idea of the final solution of Ukrainian question. If you know the history and you know what means Endlösung, then der Jugendfrage, the final solution of Jewish question, it was idea of Hitler. By the way, almost all ideas I am describing are ideas of Hitler. Putin is not original at all. The next, he called the European way of development, that means the development of national states and that are sovereign, or they want to pass a part of this sovereignty to European Union, for example. But this European way of development is Nazism, racism, degradation, and totalitarianism. Looking very good. So what about genocide intent? Let us start with Raphael Lemkin. Many of you knows him. He was inspirator and creator of the first convention in the United Nations against the crime of genocide. And what Raphael Lemkin, by the way, he was from Ukraine and born in Ukraine. What he told about genocide. He told that this is a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be killed, but everybody has to be deprived of national identity, deprived of the language and of the culture. Just became somebody else. And he told that there are two phases of genocide. One is the destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group. The other, the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor. That was the initial idea in the Convention on the Crime of Genocide. What we have in international law about the genocide intent? The first UN General Assembly resolution about the genocide even before the convention, and now it's a Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. They're telling that genocide is the denial of the right of existence of entire human groups on religious, racial, political, or any other grounds. And in the convention that we know on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, that is still in action, genocide are the acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The very phrase that Ukrainian doesn't exist as a separate people, the very phrase that Ukrainian has no culture, the very phrase that it has no history, not only lie, it's not only lie because everybody uses, and even Russians knew that for a longer period. It's a genocide intent. Nothing should be added. It's an intent to erase millions of people, erase their identity, their way of living, their way of development. Some of political leaders, not Western and Russian, saying now that only Putin has had such intent. This is completely lie. By the way, Putin added nothing to Russian textbooks on history. Nothing. All this intent and all this vision of the world with the aggression, with the empire, with occupation and depriving peoples of their, development, let it be even in this very easy way, is written in Russian textbooks, starting from school. Then in Ukrainians, their right to exist is a core of every Russian history textbook, from 18th century till present. It's a pity. Let it be so. And the vast majority of Russians are ready. There are some sociological data, and not only of official Russian agencies, but of independent agencies, that stating that Russians are ready and willing to support new wars against Kazakhstan, against Baltic states, and they are, they are convinced that Russia are ready to do it and has to do it now. But the war against Ukraine, they found, not too successful, so it should be stopped. Just, cynical pragmatism. It should be stopped because we are not successful here. Let us oppress and occupy other states. And I was completely disappointed. I have tried to found the way from this dead end. And on the anniversary of first anniversary of large-scale invasion, I have analyzed speeches and articles by leading Russian opposition leaders. And all they are Putin. No difference. Even Navalny sitting in the jail and had maybe a little chance to survive after poisoning by Putin, he speaks and thinks in the very such structure as Putin. No any difference. Navalny is saying, let us give them Crimea away. It's so difficult for us now, and we don't need so many lands and so many sanctions. Let us give them Crimea away. So we can give, we can take, no problem. Nothing can prevent us from doing anything we want to do. And the same things. And a little conclusion. The root of the aggression is in Russian imperial thinking, with elements of racism and religious messianism. And this lasts for centuries. When I'm telling about religious messianism, I can tell more, but for the moment I will tell just that the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, he's blessing Russian armies and for doing for fight against Ukraine and occupied Ukraine. And not only Putin's regime, but Russian people for the moment are responsible for supporting and even demanding aggression and massive crimes, including the genocide actions. And I'm thankful for this. I think we will have a general discussion afterwards because I want to pass the floor to Liliana Tymchenko.
I think we will have a general discussion afterwards because
it's a delay.
I want to pass.
I'm sorry for this.
Floor to Liliana Tymchenko.
Mm-hmm. Merci beaucoup.
I think we will have the general debate.
Oui, ça. C'est un honneur pour moi de m'adresser à vous aujourd'hui, chers collègues. Je remercie sincèrement Oleksiy pour ses invitations, ainsi que l'Université de Lausanne et Mosaique pour l'organisation d'une conférence aussi importante et opportune. Mais permettez-moi de vous présenter mes réflexions en anglais. So I'm going to talk about the state terrorism. I'll try to qualify it. And first we'll start from the... Sorry. Just a second. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, so can I start? Because I cannot hear you at all. Okay, so thank you very much for this possibility. Let us start from the second slide. With one of the most sought after questions about the qualification of Russia's deeds in the question of the tactics and tools that it uses in its war against Ukraine. On the one hand, the question of qualifying Russia's actions looks simple and obvious. On the other hand, international legal qualification requires precise definitions and assessments. So, answering the question, can you switch the slide? To answer the question, what is state terrorism? We need to tackle at least 4 or maybe even 7 questions. So first, what is the tactics, tools, and strategy of terrorism? We need to reflect on the idea, is there any international agreement in respect of the definition of terrorism? The third question will be, what is the approach of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe? What is the approach of the European Parliament? And there are at least three small questions. What are the consequences of declaring the state a terrorism? Is this a political question or a legal one? Where there is similar precedents? So at least these questions. So I prepared for you a couple of slides. There will be a lot of sentences, but don't think that we'll read everything. It's just to show you and to attract more attention to the concepts. So, oh, okay, I cannot see the presentation. Just a second. So researchers are still arguing about the terrorist motives. And this is actually the core question to understand how terrorists act. Cynthia Combs suggested to start from the broad notion, stating that the terrorism could be defined as synthesis of war and theater, a dramatization of the most prescribed kind of violence, that which is deliberately perpetrated on civilian non-combatant victims, played before an audience in the hope of creating a mood of fear for political purposes. So the terrorist actions is not only related to his or her personal mental disorders. Terrorist believes that such an activity will lead to a change in the political situation. Is intimidation as a means of achieving political goals? This is in the focus of terrorism. Whatever the historical period we'll be talking about, whatever the methods of indiscriminate damage to human life, health, and private property, the bombing of civilians, concentration camps, hostage taking, punishment without trial, through terrorism that state authorities and criminal groups try to achieve a radical change in the political situation. Can you switch? Yeah, the next one. What scientists found, 81% of researchers agree with and indicates an established view of terrorism in doctrine. So I just wanted to show you this overwhelming definition of terrorism, which is pretty big. And it was produced by Professor Crenshaw and Professor Pimlott in 1997. And these professors proved that 81% of researchers agree that the view in respect of terrorism in doctrine exists. Terrorism can be seen as both a policy and a method. Politics presuppose the existence of a strategy for state behavior described in a political doctrine. This strategy may be clearly described in an official document, in foreign policy strategy, or it may be contained hidden goals and be presented through the media. So the definition of terrorism is not as young. As an international crime, it was worked by a group of researchers and policymakers at the beginning, or actually it is starting from 1934 till 1937 in the framework of the League of Nations. It was prompted by the need to protect the first persons of states or persons representing them. The resulting Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Terrorism, adopted in 1937 and signed by 24 member states of the League of Nations, affirmed the duty of every state to refrain from any act designed to encourage terrorist activities directed against another state. However, you probably know the destiny of this document. It never worked. However, our understanding, our policymakers, researchers, and I believe lawyers. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So should I stop? Okay.
Okay, we are sorry for this little disagreement. Does someone have a question for the moment? No questions? Yes?
If it's okay to go back to the part where you compared Putin's action to Hitler's plan, how comparable is it? What ideas were taken? How comparable is it? What ideas were taken from Putin, from Hitler? How comparable is it, really?
Yes, yes. First is the idea of the divided nation. For Hitler, it was a start of his Anschluss, so the aggression and the occupation of Austria. It was the idea of a divided nation, and for him, German and Germanic, do you understand the difference? Were the same. Germanic nations are, that had historically, the languages and cultures were close. In fact, there was no any one Germanic nation. All Germanic tribes never was a one nation. But for Hitler, it was the idea of that all Germanic in language understanding, close languages, that all Germanic is German. For Russians, the same. All Eastern Slavonic peoples are Russian. So the people, it's like a language family. It's in every part of the world we can find language families. So for him, a divided nation means
Can I continue?
One moment, I'm responding to the question. So for him, the divided nation, the idea that Russians are divided means, in fact, that he want to include in the term Russians all people that have close languages, Ukrainians and Belarus for the first time. The same was for Hitler. The same, the idea of the final solution of Ukrainian question. This idea was not articulated by Putin himself, but it was articulated by state media that are fully controlled, absolutely controlled, 100% controlled, and every word in this media is the word of government, of regime. It's the same as the idea of Hitler of final solution of Jewish question. That was the same. This, for sure, for me, for example, it's for sure the signs of genocide intent. Not only once, but this also. We can prolong the discussion. Let me, I'm sorry, Professor Tymchenko, please, I will be back to your... Вона чує мене. Okay. Somebody can help me with this.
Okay, we'll continue with the next slide with the position of Antonio Cressese. He argued the position that the foreign concept of terrorism exists. What is really missing was agreement on the exception of this concept. An argument is very easy. The fact of the existence of an international treaty, the provisions of which prohibit terrorism, and we have them. We have articles, and I give just a couple of examples. Article 33, one of the fourth Geneva Convention of 1949, Article 4.2, D of the second additional protocol of 1972 to the Geneva Conventions, Article 4 of the Statute of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Antonio Cassis indicated that the draftsman of these documents had a very clear idea of what they were prohibiting. So continue this conversation, or actually my talk, we are faced with the question, but is there a clear vision for states regarding the concept of state terrorism? Well, state terrorism is a voluminous concept. Classification of terrorism in the dissertation, which I wrote in 1999, Political and Legal Aspects of International Terrorism, looked like I presented actually two positions, like classify terrorism into state terrorism as an international crime affecting the interests of one or more foreign states, and state terrorism as an international crime against its own citizens. So the direct object of state terrorism as an international crime, international peace and security, international stability and legality, the foundations of international cooperation, the human person, his or her rights and freedoms. So today, in the context of Russia's war against Ukraine, it is obvious that state terrorism is not the main goal of criminals, but is an instrument of the execution of the gravest international crime, such as genocide. In the broader sense, state terrorism is a tactic of organized violence by a state represented by its organs, built on economic pressure, psychological impact, political pressure, military invasion, and aimed at eliminating politicians, developing and maintaining panic among the population in order to change the existing social order, overthrow the government, and destroy the state and its people. How terrorist acts must be qualified. Explosions in Ukrainian residential neighborhoods, train stations and squares, murders and serious bodily injuries, intimidation of civilians through torture and mockery must be qualified under the Article 2 of Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide of 1948. Under Article 6 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court of 1998. Here, the intention of the terrorist state extended to the destruction of the Ukrainian people. What is the state policy of terrorism? It is not only about genocide, extermination of an entire people, but of actions of the state that harm the peaceful existence of a sovereign state, its political independence, the safety of its population, and intimidate it, threaten its life and well-being. So if we are talking about qualification, we need to address Article 33(1) of the Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war in 1949, Article 4(2)(d) of the Second Additional Protocol of 1977, relating to the protection victims of protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions, and relating to the protection of victims of non-international armed conflicts, Protocol 2. This norm is one of the postulates, the very logic of international humanitarian law. Russia's actions in the form of intimidation of the Ukrainian civilian population should also be qualified as crimes against humanity, for in the essence of Article 7 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Code, they refer to a widespread or systematic attack causing suffering, serious injury to body or to mental or physical health of the large number of people. The quintessence of the concept of state terrorism in the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financial Terrorism of 1999 can be found. So here on the screen, you can see the most important parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Intention to cause death, civilian population, the situation of armed conflict, the purpose to intimidate a population, governmental or international organization. Acts of intimidation are compelling to do or to abstain from doing any act. We can find more proofs that there is in legal society, there is a good understanding of in respect of the notion of terrorism and state terrorism. We can use national law, and there are different proofs from different systems and different legislations, like we can find the oldest anti-terrorist legislation, American legislation, United States legislation, which combines a variety of approaches and strategies in struggling with international terrorism. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the counter-terrorism laws received new developments and a new setting. Never before the issue of international responsibility for state terrorism has been discussed on a large scale. And actually, Ukraine belongs to the category of states that have not had a long experience in combating international terrorism, for example, like Italy. If we compare legislation, of Italy, Ukraine, let's say, United States of America. So Article 1 of the 2003 law of Ukraine on combating terrorism enshrines a whole range of notions defining the essence of terrorist activity. Here we can find that a terrorist state is a state that openly using its own armed forces, other armed groups, or currently using armed groups acting on behalf of and or in the interest of such a state commits terrorist acts of international terrorism. Well, the term state terrorism is not interpreted, but it is clear from the text that all forms and manifestations of terrorism are punishable. We have more examples, for example, from the decision of the Constitutional Court of Spain. This may be the feeling of insecurity within the society. That's how terrorism explained. And we have much more proofs from Lithuanian legislation, Estonian legislation, Latvian legislation, and Polish legislation. States, our partners, our neighbors, and very good friends adopted their resolutions. Their parliaments adopted their resolutions recognizing Russian Federation, Russian regime, a terrorist one. So we have example here on the screen of Lithuanian Republic and Latvian Republic. But we also have two more very important documents right now that will prove that the understanding of state terrorism exists. So we have on October 13, 2022, the resolution for the escalation in the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine was adopted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Later, European Parliament supported the resolution recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. What is in these documents in very brief? Connection of genocide with terrorism, an explanation and actually more arguments in respect of criminal activity, terrorist activity, intentional activity of Russia, like indiscriminate attacks, brutal and inhuman acts, etc. You can see this in the fragment of that document. President of the European Council, Charles Michel, stated in his remarks at Parliament's extraordinary debate of 1st March 2022 on Russian aggression against Ukraine and he actually was talking about geopolitical terrorism, pure and simple. Maybe geopolitical terrorism is not a legal notion, but again, it explains what Charles Michel was talking about, what he meant. So here's the question and here's the answer. Is there an internationally is there an agreement in respect of the definition of terrorism? Yes, I would say. However, we can find the document which would say that no, it doesn't exist. And in 18th of October of 2022, the Commissioner Ylva Johansson noted that the EU does not currently have a legal framework in place to designate a third country as a state sponsor of terrorism. So we have to say that definition of terrorism is in process. The first plenary meeting is planned for 23rd, 25th May of this year. So the approach of the Council of Europe will be suggested. So what would be the conclusions? The terrorists' main motive is the intention to intimidate the population. There is a clear vision of the essence of state terrorism in international law, a vision. The commission of it is due to military action and constitutes a crime under international law. State terrorism is a criminal political system that can act as a system that absorbs other peoples, and then terrorism carried out by the state serves as an instrument of genocide. State terrorism can constitute the essence of crimes against humanity because of its mass, systematic nature, high level of cruelty and duration. State terrorism is a method, is a tool for implementing a criminal policy of the state, such as a policy of genocide, as in the case of Russia and Ukraine. The aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, indiscriminate and brutal murders, rapes, psychological pressure against its civilian population should be regarded as acts of state terrorism, and Russia as a terrorist state. So that was my conclusion, and I will be ready to answer your questions.
Thank you, dear Professor Tymchenko. And unmute. I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'll do it.
Okay. I'm thankful to Professor Tymchenko, and I think we can have a general discussion. I'm ready to do another one presentation also, and different issues and questions that cannot be covered by a small conference in this style in the evening when everybody is tired. But maybe you have some questions. One question was already stated about Hitler and Putin. I'm not, I don't think that the events could be the same after some decades and after the living of some generations. So Putin will never be a copy of Hitler. But what I am saying about inhuman ideas, about terrible ideas, some of them, they were just copied from Hitler. Some of them, of course, were created anew. As for me, personally, not as a lawyer, but more here in this point as a historian, the question, the core question is the difference between the ordering of the world. We had in the world history, in European history, the period of empires. Mostly these empires, classical empires, existed before nationalism, or they were not so much, filled with nationalism. And these empires were organized as worlds, as spaces. In these empires, different ethnical groups and religious groups had some autonomy. So it was a way to organize the space, they organize social life in a supranational way. But this world of empires finished at latest in 1950s. But for Russia, this type of organization of its own society and of space around it, it's still actual. And if we will see the history of empires, for example, as Ottoman Empire, for centuries, it was quite a the place of toleration. For example, Eastern Orthodox people had some autonomy and had a special law that was based on the tradition and on tradition of Eastern Orthodox Church, and they were organized in some communities, millets. But at the beginning of 20th century, when to the imperialism was added the excessive nationalism, we saw the Armenian genocide in Ottoman Empire. Before that, this society was maybe ill, maybe this form was not, modern, but anyway, it worked. For Russia, and especially when it takes Russian-Ukrainian relations, it was never a tolerance. Never, ever. From the very beginning of confederation or some sort of unity in 17th century, Russia tried to eliminate Ukrainian statehood, eliminate Ukrainian culture, and starting from the beginning of 18th century, this became a conscious line from the time of Peter the Great. And all the time, all the same. And they are not changing themselves. For the moment, the territory of Russia is a territory of total crime. The history of Russia is a history of total shame. But they don't understand this. Because if you will take their textbook on history, starting from school textbook, they are calling one or another Tsar, one or another monarch to be the great because he eliminated, erased, occupied other countries. Oh, how great he is. Russia is not unique in this. But at least other countries now trying to re-examine themselves. Former empires, other things. But for Russia, still, the genocide against other nations and aggression against other nations is a part of mentality, and it's a part of national idea. And this is a problem. When I'm talking that Putin is not Putin, It's not a person. It's just a part of mentality. I'm saying that he added, yes, I'm stating this for second time, he added nothing to Russian textbooks. And that is a problem. And even if we I believe, that tomorrow Ukraine winning, I strongly believe in this. And of course, maybe regime in Russia will be changed. Changed to what? And it's completely disappointing that other leaders of Russian political life, opposition leaders, mostly in jails or abroad, they're thinking the same as Putin. The one exception is quite a fresh declaration of Russian opposition leaders signed in Berlin some weeks ago, where they calling for stopping external and internal imperialism and colonialism. But I am not sure this is sincere at all, because almost all of signifiers of this declaration declared absolutely other ideas, at least about a month ago. And moreover, they have no chances to lead Russia. They have no support, they never had support, and maybe in close future they will not have a support. This is a problem. And when this war will be finished, I don't know. When we will regain our territory and our integrity will be restored, it's not the end. When we will be, let it be, I believe in this, a member of NATO, of European Union, if it will be so. I hope so. But anyway, it's not the end of the war. Because this is a war not against Ukraine. It's a war about everything and everybody around. This is a problem. And what I have shown you, that vast majority of Russians are ready to support next war. That is the problem. Sorry, I am waiting for our other questions. Please, lady.
I had a question regarding also what you said before and just now about how the people also hold some responsibility for what's happening because they are supporting parties like this, well, regardless of the lack of democracy in Russia's process. But how could they be held responsible, and how do you see this changing, since you said yourself that it's been a process and a chain of indoctrination, and that...
How the people could be responsible for actions of regime?
Yeah, well, not exactly. It's since it's been so instilled in them and they've been indoctrinated ever since school, which I know about because I'm Greek, and my view of Greece has changed dramatically ever since I left Greece, because textbooks don't like
Macedonia question.
yeah, of course, and with Turkey and textbooks, when in their education, do not mention or write lies or have a distorted view of events. How can the people that are being taught that be held responsible, since there are no really resources and everything around them is shaping this view of a distorted reality of imperialism as being the only way for success? And also, how do you see that this could change in the future with a potential change in government?
It's it's a question for which I have no response, but I just will put some arguments. You will understand that I cannot have a clear answer because nobody has. But what I want to say is that we see the problem. We have to see the problem. That the problem is not only with regime. Putin is nothing. He's not intellectual. He's nothing. He's just a law officer who, with a chance became a leader of the biggest country in the world. But what after him? And the problem that even if the problem could be solved, for example, what example we have in mind every time? The example of Germany after the Second World War. And after the Second World War, of course, all programs, all textbooks were changed. People was accused as general, not of course legally, but anyway was accused of this crime in the real politics. People were, people were forced to come to the mass graves and took part in the engraving and the Jews from these graves and other people who were shot massively and other things. They were forced to go to the concentration camps. And of course, to see films about the massive crimes and many other things, and a part of a portion of specter of parties was prohibited. But finally, as German researchers saying that up to 80s, 35 years after the war, most of officials were the same as in the time of the Nazism time. Most people had pro-fascist and pro-Nazist, orientation. And only two generations came. Only after 2 generations, some changes in society that were not forceful but conscious came. And with Russia, I don't know. Nobody will occupy Russia. And it was a provocation in the newspaper Washington Post that Zelensky is intended to occupy Russia. No. He has no mental disorders, and Russia is, I don't know, maybe 25 more territory than Ukraine. It's abnormal territory. And do we need their territory? No. Do we need to occupy them to teach them? We have no such resources, we have no such goal and no such intent. We have intent to restore our integrity and to live in peace. That's all we need. So the problem is that the space for revenge is ready. And even future leaders of revenge are ready. The people like, maybe you know, Girkin, he is a Russian terrorist involved in shooting the Boeing 747. And he was first who came to Ukraine with the group of mercenaries, mercenaries to occupy my native city, my native town, Slavyansk, in the Donetsk region. And other things, he is ready to be such a leader. But now he has not so much influence, but he will have more. Prigozhin, the leader of mercenaries company Wagner, the most effective part of Russian forces, and quite independent. Kadyrov, the leader of Chechnya, with all his forces, and many others who we don't know. They are ready for revenge. The first for revenge inside Russia, to gain the power, and the second after this to revenge outside Russia. And so there's problems that could not be solved faster. And I know that the Russian population is also suffering from sanctions. And not everybody of them, of course, children, for example, if they are guilty, of course not. But I see no clear way. I see the situation of a very harsh and very bloody war. And I told at the beginning, it's reality. But they are not ready to see by their eyes to reality. For example, I was shocked that here in Switzerland, with the free media, with the free access to any media, it's not in Russia, but Russians here, and a lot of Russians are here in Lausanne, a lot, more than you imagine, and more than me imagine. And so many of agents you cannot imagine, and so many capitals, even in small Lausanne. It's not so important in a political sense as Geneva, because it's a place of international organization. It's not so populated and capitalized as Bern or Zurich or Basel. But anyway, even if in Lausanne, a whole net of Russian agents, a whole net of holders of Russian capitals, and a whole net of people who fled from Russia. And you cannot believe, but I saw it by my eyes and heard by my ears. They assure that Bucha was an installation. They absolutely sincere believe in this. At the beginning of the war, my son was in Bucha for 1.5 months. And maybe it was the most terrible period in my life, when I finally lost the black hair. But anyway, and they don't believe in this. We just don't believe. We don't want to believe, and we will not believe. And that's all. It's a problem. It's a problem, and I don't see the clear, the clear decision. Russia is so far from the European way of developing society. I'm not speaking about economy. I'm not speaking about, some institutions, but about society. What society is demanding. What society is demanding, power is doing. But they are very far from this, and society not demanding anything. To some extent, Russian society and Russian way of development is close to the Eastern. But what means Eastern? It means nothing, because it's just a way of showing this is the East, this is the West. East is very different, is very diverse. But if you will compare, for example, maybe if somebody Chinese here will not agree with me, but what, for example, is common with Chinese political culture is non-interference in politics. The idea of non-interference in politics. And the second, for example, is the idea of world harmony. You have to understand your place in this harmony. Maybe your place is not so good, but anyway, this is your place. And you have to be, good on this place. So it's not for struggle. It's not for participation. It's not for involvement. This is a problem. This is a real problem. They are not involved. They see how the billions of capital that were stolen from natural resources of Russia by oligarchs fleeing to other countries. No protests. Navalny tried to show the huge corruption. And what? And what? Whom he inspired? Whom? 1%? 2%? Even 10%? Not 100. They are not ready for them. This is another society, and this is a problem. They have to be other. Of course, every society has a right to be other. But what about rules? And if we are thinking as international lawyers, or if you're doing international politics or something, I don't know what next. We had the globalization, for example, as a struggle of the West, let it be very strong and very, fearful or very, mysterious word West. They're trying to do everybody like we are. This struggle failed. What we will have next? All the legal order after the Second World War, including United Nations, it's also the part of this struggle of the West. And we have to understand that this is a part of to create and to maintain the domination. To some extent it's true. Some ideals are included, but some pragmatical things also. But what we have, the development of some Eastern countries is still another. It cannot be changed by these rules created by international community. International community is a very loose term, it's about nothing. But anyway, so what next? I see the problem that if Russia will be destroyed, maybe 10% of possibility. I am not for this. I am not, demanding or claiming or dreaming about chaos and civil war or other things or suffering of people. No. But if, and this is also possible, it is one situation. Another situation, if it will be weakened but not destroyed. And maybe it's 90% of possibility. And in this case, I think a larger bloc of Russia, of Iran, of China, and possibly even of Turkey, because it's balancing between and it's a difficult question. Maybe some other countries will create a larger bloc. And maybe we will have two United Nations or something like that, because they don't like these rules and these approaches and other things. I don't know, it's just my fantasies. Sorry for this. I'm grateful for two associations. I don't know which to name first, because it would be not fair to do a privilege. But two associations, European Legal Students Association and Association Mosaique, who organizing such events, and I'm just a part of the schedule. But anyway, I'm thankful to you.
Thank you, Professor Kresin. Thank you, Dr. Tymchenko. Mosaique and Elsa were very pleased to receive you tonight for this very nice conference. We can continue the discussion outside with something to drink and to eat. And thank you, all of you, to...
But we have stopped now? We have to stop here?
Yes, now? We can continue outside.
I'm sorry, because the gentleman had the question, and I know that you already had a question.
You can
I'm
ask
sorry,
your
maybe
question.
I answered too extensively. Sorry for this. Thank you, all of you, for coming here after your work or after your study and wasting time with me. Thank you.